way broken. A wave brushed my ankles, soft and cold. But I walked away free. I grew up believing family always came first. When my younger sister got engaged, I was genuinely happy for her, until the invitations went out and my name wasn't on the list. When I asked why, my mom looked at me with that cold, rehearsed smile. "It's better if you don't come, Clara," she said. "You'd ruin the atmosphere." I laughed quietly, pretending it didn't sting. But inside, something broke. They wanted a picture-perfect family without the one person who never fit their mold. So I stayed silent. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. Instead, I started planning something they could never ignore. 2 months later, while they were still sharing filtered wedding photos online, mine went viral because my wedding guest list wasn't just local. It was global. And when my mother saw who was sitting in the front row, she fainted. My name is Clara and I grew up in a family that looked perfect from the outside. Big house, polished smiles, coordinated Christmas cards. Everything looked like a dream. But underneath, it always felt like I was the extra piece that didn't quite fit the puzzle. My parents, especially my mom, had a soft spot for appearances. My younger sister, Lily, was their golden child, charming, elegant, and effortlessly social. I was quieter, focused on my studies and career. Mom used to joke that I was the serious one, though I could always hear the hint of disappointment underneath. Still, I loved them. Every family dinner, every birthday, I showed up with gifts, with effort, with love. I thought that counted for something. But love in our family came with conditions: obedience, conformity, and silence. I learned to smile through discomfort, to pretend things were fine, even when I felt invisible. When Lily got engaged, I told myself this was my chance to make things right, to be part of something beautiful for her. I didn't realize then that it would be the event that finally broke the illusion I had spent my whole life defending. The engagement happened during a family dinner. Lily stood up, beaming, showing off a diamond so large it sparkled even under the dim chandelier light. My parents clapped. Dad looked proud enough to burst. Everyone cheered. Everyone except me. Not because I wasn't happy, but because I was stunned. She hadn't told me. "Clara, aren't you excited?" my mom asked, noticing my silence. "I am," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Congratulations, Lily. He's perfect for you." Lily hugged me with that sisterly warmth she saved for public moments, whispering, "You'll help me plan, right? You've got such good taste." That small sentence lit something in me. Maybe finally, I could belong. I started drafting ideas, venues, flowers, themes. I even made a Pinterest board that night. But over the next few days, I realized they didn't really need me. Every time I offered something, they'd say, "Oh, we've already chosen," or "Lily's fiance's family has a planner." By the end of the week, my messages in the family chat went unread. I brushed it off, thinking maybe they were busy. But deep down, I could feel the quiet wall building between us. Days turned into weeks, and Lily's wedding talk consumed the family. My mom called me occasionally, but only to tell me about the fittings, the tastings, or the guest list. She never said, "You should come." Still, I tried to stay involved. I sent ideas for table settings, lighting, even a playlist. Each time I got the same polite response: "Thanks, honey, but we've already decided." It wasn't the words that hurt. It was the tone. That soft, dismissive way of pushing me out without saying it directly. I'd sit in my apartment scrolling through family group photos, Lily trying on dresses, Dad shaking hands with her fiancé, Mom crying happy tears. And I wasn't in a single one. When I mentioned it once, Mom said, "Oh, sweetie, you're always working. We didn't want to bother you." I smiled, said it was fine, then went to bed early that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering when I became the outsider in my own family. The next morning, I woke up to find a new family group chat titled Wedding Week. I wasn't in it. I only found out when my cousin accidentally sent me a screenshot. They were planning the bridal brunch, seating arrangements, even joking about how quiet the ceremony would be without Clara's serious energy. That one hit hard. When I texted Mom about it, she replied, "Oh, honey, that's just for logistics. Nothing personal." I wanted to believe her, but logistics somehow included every single family member except me. That night, I muted the group chat I was in, the one they'd stopped using. My phone stayed silent, like my place in their lives. Still, I convinced myself it was just bad coordination. Families make mistakes, right? That's what I told myself until the invitations went out. It started when my coworker, who knew Lily from social media, said casually, "So, when's your flight for the wedding?" My stomach dropped. What flight? Oh, didn't she send you an invite? The post said its destination. Venice. Venice, my dream city, the one I'd always talked about visiting. That evening, I checked the mailbox again. Empty. I called my mom. She picked up after the third ring. "Mom, I didn't get the invitation." There was a pause, then her calm, practiced voice. "Oh, Clara, it's just that the guest list is tight, and Lily's fiancé's family has a lot of relatives." I stayed silent, gripping my phone. She continued softly. "You'll understand, honey. It's better this way." Better for who? I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "Sure, Mom. Whatever you think is best." She thanked me for being mature. That word, mature, sounded like a punishment. A week before the wedding, I went to visit my parents. The house was filled with laughter, dresses, and flowers. But when I walked in, it was like the air shifted. Too quiet, too polite. Mom pulled me aside. "Clara, please don't be upset." "Upset? You're just pretending I don't exist." She sighed. "You'd ruin the atmosphere. You know how you are. So serious. Always judging. It's Lily's special day, and we can't risk any tension." I froze. "You think I'd ruin her wedding?" Mom smiled sadly. "It's better if you don't come, Clara." Truly. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not in anger, but in realization. They didn't just forget me, they erased me. I walked out quietly, leaving behind a house full of laughter that no longer sounded like family. That night, I sat on my balcony, staring at the city lights. My phone buzzed with notifications, photos of my sister's rehearsal dinner, my parents smiling wide, captions full of love. I didn't comment. I didn't like or share. I just stared. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. I felt hollow, then strangely calm. Maybe they didn't need me. But I realized I didn't need them either. I opened my laptop and stared at my calendar. My fiancé Ethan's name glowed on a scheduled call for tomorrow. Suddenly, an idea sparked. Quiet, elegant, and unstoppable. They wanted me gone from their celebration. Fine. But when my own wedding came around, they wouldn't just remember me. They'd never forget me again. The Monday before Lily's wedding, I sat in my office pretending to focus on spreadsheets. My coworkers chatted about weekend plans, some about vacations, others about weddings. Every word felt like a reminder. On my phone, my mom's texts rolled in like small knives. "We're boarding for Venice. Everyone's so excited. Lily looks like a princess." I forced a smile for anyone who looked my way. When someone asked if I had plans, I said I'd just stay home and rest. But I couldn't stop imagining them clinking champagne glasses, laughing under chandeliers. The silence of my apartment felt heavier than ever. By 5 p.m., I made a quiet decision. If they didn't see my worth, I'd stop trying to prove it. From now on, I'd move in silence like they taught me. Only this time, silence wouldn't mean surrender. 2 days later, my Instagram feed exploded with photos of Venice. Lily looked breathtaking in lace, standing beside her groom under golden lights. My parents stood proudly, glowing with joy. My cousin tagged everyone. Everyone except me. At first, my chest tightened. Then something in me went still. Mia, my best friend, called that night. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I'm fine," I lied. But as I scrolled through hundreds of pictures, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt clarity. I was done being the family's quiet shadow. If they could throw me away so easily, I could build something they could never touch. When I closed the app, I smiled for the first time in days. Not out of happiness, but out of power. When I returned to work, everyone asked, "Didn't your sister just get married? Why weren't you there?" I laughed lightly. "Oh, I was busy with some projects." They looked surprised but didn't push. Still, I could see the unspoken pity in their eyes. It stung, but I refused to show it. Later that evening, as I rode home on the train, I thought about all those photos again, the grand venue, the designer gown, the perfect smiles. They had all the luxury, but none of the sincerity. That's when it hit me. My family didn't understand authenticity. They only valued spectacle. And if spectacle was their language, I would speak it fluently, only better. That weekend, I met Mia for brunch. She listened quietly as I told her everything, from the "better if you don't come" line to the Venice wedding. When I finished, she leaned back, crossing her arms. "You know what, Clara? They don't deserve you, but I hope you make them see what they lost." I smiled faintly. "Revenge?" she grinned. "No," I said. "Reinvention." Her words echoed in my head the whole day. Reinvention. That sounded right. By the time I got home, I had opened my planner and scribbled one sentence across the page: my wedding, my rules. Ethan called that night. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly. "I've been thinking," I replied. "About our wedding." He hesitated. "You mean?" "Yes," I said. "I want to plan it our way. Not small, not quiet. I want it to be everything they thought I didn't deserve." He chuckled. "You want to shock them?" "No," I said, smiling. "I want to redefine what family means." For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter or the background sister. I felt like someone taking back her narrative. Ethan turned out to be more supportive than I could have hoped. "You've spent your life letting people decide your worth," he told me. "Let's make this wedding about you, about us." We spent evenings researching venues, color palettes, and guest lists. He wanted an intimate beach ceremony. I wanted something grand yet warm. We decided we could have both. He never once mentioned my family. Maybe he knew I wasn't ready. Or maybe he trusted I'd decide when the time was right. I'd never felt this kind of partnership before, quiet strength standing beside mine. For the first time, I felt like I was building something that belonged entirely to me. 3 months later, our plans were in full motion, but I didn't post a thing. No hashtags, no updates, no hints. Only our closest friends knew. Even Mia called it Operation Redemption. While Lily posted her honeymoon selfies and my mom bragged about her perfect family, I stayed invisible online. Invisible, but not idle. Behind the scenes, I had found a breathtaking coastal venue, a designer who believed in storytelling through fashion, and a videographer who specialized in cinematic captures. No one knew it yet, but my wedding wouldn't just be an event. It would be a statement, broadcast not from bitterness, but from brilliance. And when the world saw it, my family would finally understand what silence had been preparing for. Working in marketing had its perks. I knew people, designers, event planners, even PR specialists. I'd spent years building networks others ignored. And now it was finally time to use them. One evening, after a long meeting, I stayed back at the office and sent 3 messages, one to a global event planner I'd once helped with a campaign, one to a PR firm in Milan, and one to a designer brand we'd recently collaborated with. Within 24 hours, I had responses. They remembered me, not as the quiet one, but as Clara, the professional who always delivered. It felt good. No family approval. No conditional affection. Just respect earned by my own hands. That night, I smiled as I opened my planner again. My wedding wouldn't just be an event. It would be a masterpiece. Ethan and I picked a date exactly 2 months after Lily's wedding, symbolic, poetic, deliberate. When I told Mia, she raised an eyebrow. "You're really doing this?" "Completely," I said. "And not out of spite. Out of peace." We started booking flights for our closest circle of friends, Ethan's colleagues, my creative contacts, and a few key clients who loved travel. Everyone was excited. Meanwhile, my family assumed I was still sulking about being left out. Mom sent the occasional guilt text, "You'll find your own happiness soon." I smiled at that. If only she knew how soon. The invitations were works of art, handcrafted envelopes sealed with gold leaf. Inside, a card with just 5 words embossed in silver, a celebration of truth and love. Each one carried a QR code linking to a private RSVP site. Only trusted guests had access. I mailed them out quietly, bypassing my family completely. The guest list wasn't just friends. It included high-profile clients, entrepreneurs, and journalists. Mia laughed when she saw the list. "This is insane. You realize your wedding might trend?" "That's the idea," I said softly. The wedding wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my story. And if the world happened to see what real elegance looked like, that was just a bonus. One night while reviewing the wedding plan, an idea struck me. What if the event gave back? I reached out to a children's charity I'd supported for years. Together, we set up a plan. The entire event would be live-streamed globally, with proceeds from donations going to fund education for underprivileged kids. It wasn't just a wedding now. It was purpose wrapped in beauty. When I told Ethan, his eyes softened. "That's exactly why I love you," he said. He didn't know it, but his words strengthened my resolve. My family believed I was selfish, detached. Soon, the world would see who I really was, and they'd have to face what they'd thrown away. A week later, my designer called from Paris. "Clara, we're creating something special," she said. "A gown that tells your story." She sent sketches: soft silk, ocean-inspired hues, pearls stitched like constellations. It wasn't flashy. It was powerful in its quiet grace. When I tried it on for the first time, I felt transformed. Not as the forgotten sister, not as the rejected daughter, but as a woman who had finally chosen herself. In the mirror, I whispered, "This is who I've always been." And somehow that reflection smiled back with pride. It started small, a tweet from a fashion blogger about an undisclosed luxury wedding collaboration. Then a mention in a digital magazine. Within days, the hashtag #TheCoastalBride began circulating online. No one knew it was me. Brands started reaching out, offering floral sponsorships and decor setups. A global PR team pitched it as a modern fairy tale wedding with purpose. Ethan was amused. "You're becoming a mystery celebrity." "Let's keep it that way," I said. My family still hadn't noticed. They were too busy posting post-wedding throwbacks. Little did they know, my own celebration would soon eclipse everything they'd ever bragged about. Weeks passed. The world buzzed quietly about the mysterious bride. My parents remained blissfully unaware. Mom sent another text, "Hope you're not still upset. Lily wants to visit soon." I didn't reply. I was done explaining myself to people who never tried to understand me. Instead, I double-checked the final guest confirmations. My PR contact confirmed live streaming details. The charity platform was ready. Everything was in place. As I watched the sun set over the ocean, I whispered, "They excluded me from their story. But now the world will watch mine unfold." And somewhere deep inside, the silence that once hurt me now felt like the calm before a perfect storm. The day finally arrived. The sun kissed the horizon as golden waves brushed against white sand. Guests began arriving from around the world, elegant, excited, unaware of who the mysterious bride really was. I stood in a quiet room overlooking the ocean, my gown glimmering softly in the morning light. Ethan walked in smiling. "You ready?" I nodded. More than ever. Cameras began to roll. The event was being live-streamed across multiple platforms under the title, "The Coastal Bride, a celebration for change." Meanwhile, across town, my mom texted me again, "Dinner tomorrow?" I smiled and replied simply, "You might be busy watching something tonight." She had no idea that in less than an hour, her forgotten daughter would be trending worldwide. As the ceremony began, a soft instrumental played. Guests whispered in awe. The floral arch shimmered with cascading orchids. When I walked down the aisle, the cameras zoomed in, and suddenly social media exploded. "It's Clara Whitmore," one post read. "The sister who was left out of her family's wedding, now hosting the global wedding of the year," another followed. Within minutes, the hashtag Clara Whitmore wedding was everywhere. Ethan squeezed my hand and whispered, "The world's watching." "I know," I said, smiling. "Let them." Thousands tuned in live, not for gossip, but because the ceremony was genuinely beautiful. And as I said my vows, I felt something powerful. Peace. Right after the vows, I turned to the guests and the cameras. "Ethan and I wanted this day to be more than a celebration of love," I said softly. "We wanted it to mean something." A screen behind us lit up showing the charity link. Viewers could donate directly to fund education for children around the world. Within minutes, donations poured in. My phone buzzed endlessly, notifications of love, support, and generosity. Reporters called it the most meaningful modern wedding ever streamed. Ethan whispered, "This is bigger than we imagined." I nodded. That's the point. For once, my name wasn't attached to pity or exclusion. It was attached to purpose. Halfway through the reception, my phone buzzed with frantic messages from Mom. "Clara, what is this? Why didn't you tell us? It's everywhere." Then Lily's message came, "So this is payback." I stared at her text for a moment before replying, "No. This is peace." Mia laughed when she saw my phone. "They must be losing it." "Probably," I said, sipping champagne. "But that's not my problem anymore. For years, I tried to earn their approval. Now they were trying to earn my attention." The irony wasn't bitter. It was liberating. By the next morning, every news outlet was covering it. Sister excluded from wedding host's global charity ceremony. From rejection to redemption, Clara Whitmore's powerful celebration. The donations crossed $1.5 million within 24 hours. When I saw the headlines, I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. The silence I once drowned in had turned into a global voice. Mom tried calling again, but I let it ring. She'd never understood my silence before. Now she could sit with her own. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a forgotten daughter. I felt like the author of my own story. 3 days later, I finally answered her call. "Clara," Mom began, her voice shaky. "You humiliated us." "No," I said calmly. "I just lived my life. You chose to erase me. The world just reminded you I exist." She went quiet. "I didn't do it for revenge," I continued. "I did it because I deserve to be seen, and because kindness deserves a spotlight more than cruelty." "You could have told us," she whispered. "You could have invited me," I replied. The line went silent for a long time. Then she said, almost softly, "You looked beautiful." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A week later, the last of the wedding footage went viral again, this time on a morning show. Hosts praised the event's impact, calling it a symbol of quiet power. I sat beside Ethan, coffee in hand, watching it replay. He smiled. "You changed the narrative." "No," I said gently. "I just told the truth." When I checked the charity dashboard, the total had crossed $2 million. As I scrolled through the endless supportive comments, I realized something profound. My revenge was never destruction. It was transformation. And the family who once excluded me now lived in a world where my name meant compassion, success, and strength. I had rewritten the legacy they tried to erase. The morning after the wedding video went viral, my phone exploded with messages. News outlets were calling it the most inclusive wedding of the year. But the real shock came when my mother posted a long public apology, tagging me. "We should have celebrated her all along," she wrote. I didn't reply. For years, I'd begged for their approval. Now they were the ones begging for mine. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was closure. Seeing her words beneath my trending video, I realized I finally had it. My sister called next. Her voice trembled between guilt and envy. "Everyone's talking about your wedding, Clara. Even the people who ignored you." I smiled faintly. "That's the point, isn't it?" She paused. "Mom's embarrassed. Dad's furious." I told her gently, "They'll survive." I did. Before hanging up, she whispered, "You really changed the story." For once, she didn't sound condescending, just honest. That was enough. A week later, my parents showed up at my office unannounced. They brought flowers and a photo album labeled family. I didn't invite them in. I simply said, "Thank you." But I already built one of my own. They stood speechless as I closed the door. The power wasn't in anger. It was in finally choosing peace over approval. The video reached 10 million views. Wedding magazines reached out for interviews, calling it a symbol of self-respect and reinvention. I accepted one just to say this: it's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming the space they said I didn't deserve. Viewers loved it. I became the voice for everyone who'd ever been excluded. Months later, I sent out one last invitation to a quiet dinner on the anniversary of my wedding. My sister came. My parents didn't. We toasted under soft lights, and she said, "You didn't destroy them. You just showed them who you are." I smiled. That was always enough. That night, I found a letter slipped under my door. Mom's handwriting. We watched the video again. "You looked happy. I hope someday we'll see you smile like that in person." I folded it carefully. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about letting the silence speak for you. I walked along the beach the next morning, barefoot and free. The tide erased every footprint behind me like the past finally letting go. I whispered, "You thought I'd walk away broken." A wave brushed my ankles, soft and cold. But I walked away free. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the kind of cool that makes you feel alive without needing anyone to confirm it. I kept walking, past the shoreline where the water turned from pale gold to deep blue, past the point where the beach curved and the rest of the world disappeared behind me. For the first time in as long as I could remember, there was no noise in my head. No replaying of old conversations. No rehearsing of apologies I no longer owed. Just the sound of the ocean, indifferent and magnificent, doing what it had always done, moving forward without asking anyone's permission. But peace, I've learned, is never as simple as it looks from the outside. It is not the absence of consequence. It is the willingness to stand inside the storm and choose stillness anyway, even when the aftermath is louder than the event itself. The messages kept coming for weeks after the wedding. Not just from Mom and Lily, but from aunts and cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. Some wrote with warmth. Others carried that particular flavor of guilt dressed up as affection. "I always knew you were something special, Clara," from the same people who had never once checked on me during all those years I spent invisible. I read every message carefully. I didn't respond to most of them. I wasn't punishing anyone. I simply had nothing left to prove to people who had needed the whole world to notice me before they could. What I hadn't expected was the silence that came from my father. Dad never called. Not when the wedding trended globally. Not when the charity donations crossed $2 million. Not when the morning show ran the segment titled, "The Woman Who Turned Rejection into Purpose." He had watched it all, I was certain of that. But he said nothing. And somehow, that silence cut deeper than anything Mom had written in her tearful public apology or anything Lily had whispered through guilt. 3 months after the wedding, a letter arrived in the mail. His handwriting, careful, deliberate, the same way he used to sign my school reports when I was a child begging silently for his attention. I sat with the envelope unopened for 2 full days before I could bring myself to read it. When I finally did, it was short. Only 4 sentences. "Clara. I didn't know how to fight for you when it mattered. I told myself you were strong enough not to need it. I was wrong about which one of us needed to be stronger." I folded the letter quietly and sat with it for a long time. It wasn't the apology I had spent years imagining. It wasn't the dramatic scene where he appeared at my door, regret carved into every line of his face, finally saying all the words I'd needed as a little girl. It was 4 sentences on plain white paper. But it was the most truthful thing he had ever offered me, and I knew it the moment I read it. I didn't cry. I just whispered to the empty room, "Too late, Dad. But thank you." And that, I think, is the part of this story no one ever tells you about. The revenge feels clean and decisive when you imagine it. In the living of it, it was beautiful. The wedding was everything I'd built it to be, purposeful, graceful, witnessed. But what came after wasn't triumphant silence. It was this strange, quiet ache I hadn't budgeted for. Because when your family finally sees you, truly sees you, and it arrives too late to change anything real between you, that hurts in its own particular way. Not the sharp, familiar hurt of being excluded. Something quieter. Something that sits with you in the mornings before the world gets loud. Mom and I talk now. Not often, not with the ease of people who have resolved everything between them, but with the careful, tentative politeness of people genuinely trying. She came to my apartment last spring. We sat at my kitchen table, and she said, "I used to think being a good mother meant keeping the peace. I kept the peace by turning you into the disruption." I didn't respond immediately. I let the words settle into the room. Eventually, I poured us more tea. Lily sent a message on my birthday. She didn't call, perhaps she understood that was still too far. But she wrote, "I've been thinking about all the times I let Mom speak for both of us and said nothing. I don't have an excuse. I just want you to know I see it now." I held her message for a while before writing back, "I know. Me too." I had imagined that reclaiming my own story would feel like victory. What it actually did was reveal the full weight of everything lost. Not just what they did to me, but the years we could have had together if any one of them had chosen differently at the right moment. But we cannot live inside the years we didn't get. Ethan asked me one evening, months after everything had quieted, "Do you have any regrets?" I thought about it honestly. "I regret that it had to go this far before they understood," I said. "But I don't regret becoming who I am because of it." He nodded and said nothing more. He didn't need to. My family thought they were writing me out of the story. What they actually did was hand me the pen. And I think, in the end, in the quiet, complicated end that looks nothing like the version you imagine, that is the only kind of revenge worth having. Not the kind that destroys people. The kind that builds you into someone they spend the rest of their lives wishing they had chosen. The wave brushed my ankles again. Soft and cold. And free. I kept walking.